So there's 100 games coming out for the PS4 in the next year or so, and of that there's 70 indie titles. So this got me thinking, well, of those 70 indie titles, how many of them are any good and how many of them are just slapped on as an additional number? So I thought, okay, so there's something like Trine 2, there's Outlast, there's Dead Nation, and then there's things that I've played before, such as there's TEC, and then there's Dive Kick, One Finger Death Punch.
I mean, we could make a huge list of this. I mean, I didn't think there was many indie titles I played, but recently, noticed playing a lot more.
And then there's things like Resogun, which came out as a launch indie title, made by Housemarque, and I highly enjoyed it.
Game out at the time.
Some editors of different websites definitely say it's one of the best. I personally wouldn't, but
I mean, it's a twin stick shooter. It's like the oldest genre out there, but I mean, some people say it's still. And that's the thing with these indie developers. A lot of these indie games are just platformers or just reimaginings of older games. I think they're really simple to make.
One of the best things for this is Dive Kick, which is basically like a 1980s fighting game with 2 buttons, because that's all you could fit on a controller those days, and it works really well. It's well balanced, it's fun to play, there's enough character design, there's enough modes.
Mostly it's the comical value, it's the fact that it's for fighting. It's like takes the mick out of fighting game community, but doesn't it, it's made by the community for the community, but it's made to make the game more accessible. So
which it definitely does, because you've got the fact that anyone can press X and whatever else.
Whatever buttons they choose. It's just the fact that indie titles, they tend to bring all the innovation. They tend to like make advancements. Like, for example, Portal, right? That was originally an indie title, and look at where it is now. Valve took it on and made Portal 2, and look where that got. I mean, that's a
very highly regarded game.
Yeah, it's just original. And this is the stuff. Yeah, it may not be revolutionary in that, games don't really try to copy it, but the point is that indie titles tend to do something different, and sometimes they're way ahead of their time.
I think something like TEC 3001 is probably one of the games that I haven't played myself, but I've watched Cena play, and it's one of those things where I look at it and think, wow, why has no one done this yet?
Exactly. It's just like
Fast, quick play, very dynamic, keeps you on your toes, very simple to understand, low skill cap but very hard to master, and I just thought, basic premise is absolutely spot on.
I mean, this is like it seems like a mobile game, but for £2.79 you get like 52 levels as well as an endless run, and these levels are pretty decent. The mechanics are just perfect. The thing about these indie titles that I've noticed, the ones I've played, especially like One Finger Death Punch, TC 3001, Mitsurugi Kamui Hikai, those games provide an experience. The most AAA titles have too much fluff in them. Like, for example, something like TEC 3001, you're not going to see like a AAA developer make something like that, because they just think, we need the characters, we need the story, we need this, we need that. You don't need any of that for some of this. What you get with these indie titles, like
stripped back version.
Yes, like Mitsurugi, they've not gone into crazy on the story or character development. You literally just, there's none of this like fluff. There's none of this stuff that you don't want in the game.
Basically shows that games can go back to basics and still be just as good as any AAA title you're ever going to get.
Because if you're like all about just the core gameplay, then indie titles can sometimes provide that. I mean, that some of them just focus on the story, but some of them, so indie titles tend to specialize, whereas AAA games, they tend to like be the complete package. They tend to provide you with everything that you'd want in the game, and sometimes you don't want that. Sometimes for example, Mirror's Edge, for example, I love that game, everything about it, but if I just say want to do time trials, I'm not really going to care about the story. So if I want to, that's why I like TEC, because it's just focused completely on the running.
I think this goes back to, I've played an RPG which is very unwell known, called Vandal Hearts, and it was a 8-hour RPG which sounds really unappealing, But actually, it worked very well because the story was told in very little text things and through the actual people you defeat and battles and so on. Very simple premise, and yet because of like how difficult some of the fights were in it, and it was totally based on the strategy, it was very fun to play for the 8 hours that I played it for. I didn't care about the story. I went in thinking, oh, it'll be an 8-hour RPG that I'll go and play and care about the story, and there'll be a couple of like fights that'll be pointless and really easy, and it'll be like an interactive drama. It wasn't. It was completely different. It was very strategy based, quite challenging eventually, but yet it was something really different, and it worked very well. And I did some research on it, and it was made for under $500,000, which is like
nowadays
is nothing for a game.
This is the thing. It's just the thing about these indie titles that might enjoy, right? Like, for example, One Finger Death Punch. Do they have the most complex code? No, they're not very difficult to make. They're easy to make. They're easy to work with. They don't require a high budget. You know, you don't need like motion capture or anything. You don't need characters. You don't need a script. One Finger Death Punch, all you need, the announcer, who's got an amazing voice. You just basically an algorithm to spawn enemies and a few simple mechanics. It's all it is. It's just, you know, a 2-button game. But it's like I spent 29 hours playing the game, and it was so much fun because it's just straight in there. I don't have any nonsense. I don't have anything that I don't need. It's just, it doesn't pretend to be something that it isn't. That's what a lot of games try to do. They try and make out that they're more than they actually are.
I think this goes on to a point that I was going to make, which is that there's too much criticism in the game industry for games that just try and do something totally different. I mean, Beyond Two Souls is a good example, that it just tries to do something totally different.
Now, do a story,
if you then if you take that and go to a non-AAA version and look at something like Gone Home, it might not be everyone's cup of tea.
It might just be not, like an hour game.
It's an hour-long game where you basically just go and look at
walk around the house,
an environment, basically. But if that's what you want in a game, if you want to walk around and you want an hour's time where you basically can read a book in a way, it's an interactive book.
Yeah,
that's fine. I haven't got a problem with that, but why are people kind of, it's not a game, it doesn't add any value?
Well, the point is,
it does. For the people that play it, it's fine. It might not be the best game, fine, give it a 50. But don't criticise them for trying something totally different for the people that want that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's just, some people have their views on the gaming industry and where they want it to go. When you see a AAA game doing that, you just fear, well, what if every AAA did that? But with indie, you just don't see them as much of an influence anymore. So I guess people don't look at it as highly. Whereas if you see a big budget game, you just think, well, maybe more developers would take that approach. But with indie titles, like for example, the Stanley Parable, like I wouldn't really enjoy something like Beyond Two Souls, but the Stanley Parable I enjoyed because there's no cutscenes. It's all like interactive. You walk around. Some people criticise because this is a very divisive game. Some people say, oh, it's too short. It's just, you don't do anything. There's not enough content. It's not worth the price. It's not a game. But I'm just like, for the hours that you might not get more than like 6 hours out of it if you want to see everything. But for the hours that you get, it's just hilarious. I've never had like 6 hours of gaming that were so different from anything else. They had the comedy. They made me really think about how other games are designed, and it's not just about.
I have to say, I was very skeptical about the game because I'm very much a story-driven kind of gamer, and I thought I'm going to hate this game.
You just walk around.
I'm going
to
absolutely hate this. But I went and played it and thought, no, this is actually very clever because it kind of takes the mick out of the common things that developers do. That I'm like, yeah, okay, I like it, but why do I actually care for this stuff? And I thought, like, it's not going to make me change my gaming habits. It's not going to make me do anything different. But it was very, very clever in the way that it put it across and said, if you fall off here and you die, we'll just restart it. And you're like, oh, you tried to finish the game by falling off a cliff. How dare you? And
you were expecting a cutscene right now, weren't you? It's just the fact that the game is what we're forgetting here is that games are a piece of art, right? And the Stanley Parable best represents why gaming is an art, because it conveys a lot of things in a really creative way. And that's not something that every game can do. So what a lot of people are forgetting is that the Stanley Parable, yes, you don't walk around shooting stuff, doesn't mean it's not a game. It might just be an interactive experience, but it's very much related to gaming. It's not like an interactive experience that pretends to be something it's not. It's a very well thought out. I mean, it was originally a mod, but some people just discredit it because it's just too different. That's the thing.
You have to go to the extremes.
Yeah.
And I think some people, because it's an extreme, are like, oh no. But I don't really see why. If you don't want to play it, don't play it. Why are you criticising something you've not even played? What benefit are you gaining from criticising something, one, that you've not played, and two, that something else might like, that you might actually... They might be hurt by the fact that you saying that you don't like something and think, oh, they have a decent reason why, but you've not even played it. And I know many people on Metacritic that do this, that will just slander games, give it 0, they haven't played it, and they'll just be like, oh, it's an indie title. Well, okay, what's your problem with indie titles?
I mean, yeah. I mean, I've been guilty of hating on some games without knowing them. I mean, people get these certain ideas about certain things and just see them as like, oh no, that's a threat, or that's not how things should be done. But you can't really tell until you've played the game, and not everyone appreciates the same thing, and that's why it's kind of subjective. That's why they're an art. So
basically, what I'm trying to say in this talk is that there might be 70 indie titles, but I'm all for it if they're actually good. If they're all kind of like the games we've mentioned, like TEC or Dive Kick, or they're like Trine, the complete story, or Portal, or the Stanley Parable, and they take a different take on things.
Exactly.
Why not?
And another thing is, some people complain about them because of length, because indie titles tend to be quite short. The point is, most people don't even finish their games. A lot of people don't have the time, so you got to credit indie titles that they do something different in a very short period, and they don't charge you like a full AAA price for it.
If you look on Steam, or you look on PSN, or you look on Xbox Live, and you look at the completion of AAA titles, it's about 25 to 40%.
And that's just doing the main story. So,
and I would say that most games you're looking at 25%. So 1 in 4 people who actually purchase it will finish.
And that's just like on normal.
Yes, and that's on normal. So you're looking at 1 in 4 people actually finish the game on the easiest difficulty.
Exactly. So the conclusion here is really...
There's no... Basically, why are people arguing about value when they don't actually get the value out of the games that they don't criticise? Like, for something like Assassin's Creed, no one... Very little people get fully through that. They'll play a quarter of it, or play a half of it, and only a quarter of people actually get through the full game, and yet they're like, oh, but it offers me more content.
Exactly.
Why not just finish a whole indie title?
A lot of these like AAAs are buy on sale, like TEC 3001 for £2.79, or 24 hours of gameplay out of it. That was like a really well spent. So
Dive Kick was the same, £2.
Yeah.
Hotline Miami, £2. Dead Nation was on sale recently for £4.
One thing is definitely like $3.50. The point is, you can get a lot out of it because they're so focused on delivering the experience. Because them indie titles are made by gamers for gamers, and because their indie developers can afford to take risks because they're on a lower budget, less to lose, a smaller team, a group of people with ideas, and they've got a very simple concept and try to convey it in a very simple way.
Indie titles,
ideas across. Indie titles, they're not a bad thing. No replacement for AAA, but they're not a bad thing.